All right, everybody, let's talk about designing life and what that entails and our responsibility and blessing to be able to do so. So if you guys are out there, let me know in the comments a time in your life where you have designed it, where you have intended on something to be, and then it came to be. So for me, I've got many examples of that, but it also happens on a daily basis. It happens over and over and over again. And that begs the question of like, what is this human experience? Are we connected to something greater? And even our intention. So if we get a thought to intend into a certain direction in life, does that thought even begin with us? There's this good analogy. There's many different analogies, but there is one regarding a wheel. And if you imagine a wheel and you imagine the ground, right? The wheel's rolling, but the experience that the ground has of the wheel, that's where it's all happening, right? That's where the expression of the wheel is being fulfilled. It's when that wheel is in contact with the ground, and it's that motion perpetually that the ground experiences. And that's the whole point of the wheel, right? Is to carry some sort of item forward. And so the thing with the wheel, the very edge, the surface of the wheel hitting the ground, is that it happens in a moment. That wheel's in expression, or that point is in expression on the ground for a moment, and then it's gone, right? And we can think about the moments in our life that way. We can even think about our life that way, that we are happening like that, the surface of the wheel hitting the ground, and then eventually we are gone. But we are part of this bigger wheel, right? Like there's the center of the wheel, there's the rims, there's this whole other mechanism that makes us up. But our life is that one moment, that moment of expression of where that surface of the wheel hits the ground. I also had a similar vision of that in regards to just watching a fire. When you're watching a fire burn, when you're watching that flame is happening in one instance. It's there, visual, I experience it, we can experience the flame, and then it's gone. And the question is, where was it before and where does it go after? Because it's still existing. And what is it connected to? And the answer to that is that the flame is an experience of light, and light cannot be created or destroyed. It's essentially all-knowing, all-powerful, and in all places. Light is permeating everything. And I'm saying this because if we look at this, number one, we're going to get into the light, right? Which I feel like we could talk a little bit about today. I have a comment here. Be a small wheel or a big one. Small one makes noise and doesn't get far. Big one is silent and with one turn goes far. The God is the biggest wheel. Saint Nikolai Velimirovic. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, but the comment's gone. Was I talking about fire? Yeah, when I was looking in the fire, I could see that this is a result of, from a physical standpoint of this dimension. It comes from a tree because wood was burning, and that tree was existing to collect minerals from the ground, hydrogen and oxygen from the water in the ground, light and air from above to gather all of that into its wood. And then that created that spark, that flame. I'm a lesbian. I finally understand. Perfect comment, I'm sure. But like, where does the light come from? Where does the air come from? Where does the minerals come from before they were what they were here and now? And that's That's a question that is kind of mind-boggling when we actually think about where light comes from and where all of these other elements that make us up come from in order for us to have an expression of here and now. Here meaning in three-dimensional space, and now meaning within the context that we call time, which isn't actually how it works. And then when you break down that all of these moments of our life are happening so that we can have this moment of now and then we can have this perception of time, it starts to also beg us to ask the question of why. Why are we having these moments? Why are we having these experiences? What is the point? What is the point? And the reason why I'm thinking about this is because there's a it's not really viral, but there's a thread going on right now having to do with narcissism and a lot of people commenting. We're not going to get into that topic. We're going to get into the topic of like the things in life that challenge us and our placement in that. Because just like you can make a vision board, that's how I started this conversation off, wasn't it? Life design. So that's that's the whole point of this. If we are designing life every single moment of the day, and you can do it with things like a vision board, we can do that. We can set a vision, set an intention. And that also is like, where did this intention and vision come from? But who out there has made a vision board or wrote something in a journal or wrote a check to themselves? I've written checks to myself that were in amounts that I didn't know where they're going to come from and with a date that it came from or that it was supposed to come to, and it's happened. So has anybody else out there done that before? And if you haven't, why haven't you? I'm waiting for comments on this one. A memory board is also really cool. So there's vision boards where we're setting what is to be in the future. We're aligning our intentions, our emotions, our mind, hopefully our actions to that. And then there's also something that I invented. So Colleen says that she does it yearly. Has anything ever came true on that? Actually, my now wife had Jason Momoa on her vision board when I had short hair, and she found her vision board later on. And then I look like I had hair all on my face too. But then I look like essentially not saying I mean, people used to call me Aquaman and stuff, especially when I was driving around a blue car with three wheels and no roof. But essentially looked similar to that. And somehow I was a manifestation of hers. Yes, put Italy and Greece on my vision board, was there within the year. Great. When we set a vision board, that's setting an intention. What I've come to realize is that our minds, our thoughts, our emotions are essentially like vision boards themselves. So if we are constantly thinking one thing, I hate my job, I hate my job, I hate my job, and then we find data and verification of why our job sucks, then every single day we manifest a job that we hate. And even if we switch careers, that is the imprint that we have in our mind, and we continue to create. And this is another reason why opening up the body is so important, because in our fascia, in our tissues are the issues from our life. Our body doesn't just store information in the brain. The body is also the brain. So think about our entire unit as capable of processing life. And so if you're sitting in a chair for the last 17 years, there's stagnant energy in parts of your body because of lack of movement, lack of expression. If you have been walking around like this, because why? Why would you walk around like that? It could be because you're looking at your phone all day or reading, but also this position signals protection. This is the body's protected. If you guys just bring your fists up like this, you're going to feel something. Like immediately I feel safe, but I also feel like I'm preparing for battle. If I just tuck my chin, bring my hands up, block my vitals, block my face, I'm preparing for something. I'm preparing to be attacked. And if you guys take this position, you guys may have either read a book or seen a TED Talk about power position. If we stand with our arms up and our heart open and actually lift up the heart and see if you can take your pelvis. If your pelvis is anteriorly rotated, which means that the front of your pelvis is dipped down, like if this is the front, see if you can pull up your navel point and bring your pelvis to flat. What that's going to do is expose your genitals a little bit more, right? As opposed to them being completely tucked underneath you, like a dog with its tail tucked, protecting itself. You're actually bringing your navel point in, your chest is opening up, and you're exposing your genitals. Your head is held up, your chin is still parallel to the ground, but it's expansive here, exposing vitals, exposing. This is very vulnerable right here. So when we're in this position, what do you feel like? Now, I said I felt safe here. Safe isn't, did I say safe? I think I did say safe, but mostly what this feels like is protective. Protective because I'm scared. This feels vulnerable. This feels, but I don't like, that's like such a distant emotion for me. This actually feels confident and powerful, where something like fear doesn't even matter. So the position that we're in, because our body is programming our mind and our emotions, on how to be. I started off owning gyms because I started off going to school for psychology, actually, and exercise science. So I was first involved in the mind. And then I detoured off that career because I didn't like the prospects that were presented in front of me of like what that would look like in the real world, which is essentially like being a counselor or even a psychologist. It didn't really excite me. So I got into the physical component of the body. And then after 10 years of owning a gym, which essentially was surprisingly very much having to do with mindset, because I trained regular people, office workers, people that had issues, and even professional Olympic level athletes, even people that were training to do things like go into the Navy SEALs. And surprisingly, there was so much that had to do with mindset when it came to training the physical body. And also with my psychology background, I never stopped researching and studying and working with people in psychology. And there's also a surprising amount of the psyche that has to do with the physical body. So this line that we draw so that we can determine which class we go to and study a very separated aspect of the human condition isn't really that separated in reality. The body is the mind, and the psyche and the mind and the emotions are encompassing everything. We like to think that the mind is happening in the brain, and I'm not even sure that that's true. Because the body, the mind, the brain, all of this is part of something else, right? So I'm saying that the mind is not just encapsulated in the brain, it goes into the body. But even beyond that, the body, the brain, the mind, us, this physical component is much bigger than what we think of as this physical unit, right? We think about ourselves as like from skin in. But back to that wheel analogy I made earlier, this physical body, this physical expression is a moment where the edge of that wheel is hitting the ground, and we are allowed to exist and express in linear time and three-dimensional space so that we can have this experience. But we are part of something greater. Our body is an aspect of something greater. And I'm saying all of this because if we can start to work with our physical and non-physical, meaning psychological and emotional and energetic expression, if we can align all of that, then we are able to be more powerful within reality. And the question is like, what is power? What makes us powerful here? What makes us powerful here is the ability to influence fields of energy. So even from a Western scientific standpoint, when they look and they ask, what is physical matter? They come down and they go lower and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, bigger and bigger and bigger microscopes. They find energy and wave patterns and frequency, none of which is physical. And some of it even pops in and out of reality without anyone knowing where else it's going. And there's a lot of unanswered, quote, science that we have here in the West. And a lot of what we do over here is, it has some holes in it, right? Because we can have two scientists saying different things, and essentially there's a panel of people that determine which one is correct. It has nothing really to do with the data that they're proving or disproving. It just has to do with whoever's most well liked. And it's usually 50, 60, 100, 200 years later, when all of that panel is dead, that other people that do not have an agenda, do not have a family to provide for that is based off of which one of these philosophies is correct, when they're completely distant from it, that we can really analyze the whole thing. But by then we're completely programmed to one way of being. And it's hard to unwind that. So for instance, when electricity was discovered, it was discovered after the gravitational model of the universe was made. But when electricity was known, I should say, what we knew it as was lightning. So there was a time when there wasn't electrical wires running through our house and electricity wasn't powering everything. And there were scientists that were doing science, and they were proving that electricity, the same stuff that makes up a lightning strike, is also running through our body. And the model of science then was, so this was don't quote me on this, but this was around the 1800s, maybe late 1700s. And the science that said, like, hey, there's not just tubes pushing chemicals, we're not just a chemical soup, but there's also electricity going through the body. And this is like, they didn't know how to even come up with this, because the model was that we are made of a bunch of tubes that are taking matter or chemicals through the body. So then it's like, okay, well then what else is there? So we have all these scientists that think that there's just tubes inside of our body, so there can't possibly be lightning bolts inside of our body, because their model is that the tubes cannot hold a lightning bolt. They didn't know what nerves were at this point. And so eventually it took about 100 years for acceptance. I even think it took a little bit longer than 100 years, but it took a long time. There were some friendly people that were able to consider and maybe even unite, but then even there would be arguments within those unions, and people would split off. And we all have to realize that scientists need to make a living. They have to have something that's valuable to society. So when they find something, AKA the body's made of tubes, and here's a process that helps the flow of chemicals go through the body, and then somebody else comes in and says, actually, electricity is also very important in the body. Well, whatever you've designed your entire life on with the tube model, then the electricity model kind of overturns it. So there's a lot of strife and fighting and covering up and even burning down labs and killing people that happens in science. And I'm just saying this because anyone can discover this stuff. Just about anybody that we know from history, Galileo was outcast. Pythagoras, I believe, was killed with an axe, or maybe it might have been somebody else. We can even take Jesus, right? Coming and saying like new things into society, killed if he existed, like if the stories are true. But even the people, I'm spacing on this really important name right now. Why am I spacing on this name? Anyways, a lot of the important scientific figures, the people that were great thinkers in our past, were either outcast. Even Nikola Tesla was outcast, murdered, outcast or murdered. That's essentially, and they spent their entire life with oppression and suppression. So that's what it takes to have new science discovered, usually 20, 50, 100 years after you die. And that's what happened with the people that were saying that there's nerves and electricity going through the body. And so I'm saying all this because the way that we, as somebody who's been studying the physical body, the emotional body, the psychological body, the energetic body for my entire adult life, there's so much that is unknown to mainstream science and even covered up to mainstream science. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting because once we're open and aware to how this reality and how our body works, it's almost like you get a superpower. And so what is one of these superpowers? One of these superpowers is making a vision board, setting an intention, and watching somehow reality harmonize around you. Why is it harmonizing? Remember I said what power is? If we have alignment. So if we are holding ourselves in posture, physical posture, remember I said the body is the mind and the mind is the body. So physical posture is part of that. if we make on our vision board or on our intentions, CEO of a company I created, and we're still walking around like this, sleeping in every day, taking naps during the day. And not saying that this isn't hustle culture. This is just, you're not living. You're living at a low brightness. Like your luminosity is low. And when you walk into a room, you're being pressed upon. You're a depressed version of self. That's not in alignment with your intention. So that's one example. The way that you hold yourself, the way that you walk into rooms, the way that you greet other people, is that in alignment to the intention? And what's even also important is how we think about ourselves. So how we hold ourselves, this is our posture. This versus this. Are we walking in alignment with our desires, with our intention? Do we have a smile in our heart because things are going our way? Because there's a knowing sense of self? Are we open when we interact with others? Are we able to see their full potential, their totality? Because we've come to realize in ourselves that we are a process that is happening. We are a verb. We are happening. The quote, mistake we made yesterday doesn't define us today. In fact, that allowed us to learn to be who we are today. And we're able to look at people who even trigger us, and we're reminded of what we're working on because they're triggering within us something that is there. Now, the thoughts in our head, how does that come up to that, right? So if we're holding ourselves in this posture, you know who holds himself in this posture? Con men, right? Con men stands with confidence man. They have lots of influence in reality, and you can get a long way by just being happy, friendly, smart, witty. You can do that. But what's the intentions in the mind? I'm going to erase the con man thing and just rewind. Let's not go on that thread. But what are we thinking about ourselves? Are we holding ourselves like this with the words that we're using to describe reality? Or are we walking into places and picking at all the things that are wrong there? Oh, that's dirty. That person's ugly. You know, I used to own gyms, right? So I was very fixated on the physical appearance. And I used to, 20 years ago, look down on people if they weren't in great physical shape, and they weren't eating perfectly. And I used to think that they were disrespecting evolution, and there would be a part of me judging them. And essentially what I was doing was I was nitpicking and judging reality, which is essentially judging and nitpicking and talking down and deteriorating myself and my existence, because all of this is existing with us. Sometimes I can say for us, but all of this is existing as us is actually the more accurate term. So depending on the part of the spectrum that I'm zoned in on, I might say everything is existing for us, everything is existing with us, or everything is existing as us. And so when we look into reality, we have all of these archetypes. Everybody that is existing, everybody is looking to reality, and they're experiencing archetypes of people just like you. They're experiencing the villain. They're experiencing the person who's overpowering and steals their energy. They're experiencing the energy, I already said that. I was going to say energy vampire, but they're experiencing the person that they hate. They're experiencing the person that they love. There's all of these characters in all of our realities that are existing as us. And we are all of those characters in other people's stories. So when we're looking out and we see a villain and we hate that person, we're really just hating ourselves. Is just the word to use in that sentence? We're really just hating ourselves. We're really, on a deeper level, profoundly hating a part of ourself that we witness within that person. That's one of the first things you learn in psychology school, psychology university, psychology 101. The people around you that you really like, if you write down their attributes, are the attributes that you like about yourself. The people around you that you dislike, if you write down their attributes, are the attributes about you that you dislike. That's literally, you learn that like first year psychology. And then it's the unpacking. Like, what does that mean? Because we're like, no, I hate my dad because my dad used to beat me, but I don't beat anybody. Well, it's not so just like, it's not so apparent. This is a very dynamic existence, and you are not your father here. What if you chose this interaction? Or what if you are a part of your father? Have you guys seen that? It's like a earth, and then there's a creature inside the earth. This is a meme. And so we have the surface of the earth, and then the creature inside is poking out its four fingers, and on its four fingers there's like a face on each one of them, so it kind of symbolizes that they're different people. But underneath the beings labeled as like God or the universe or something like that, and then there's an arrow that's pointing to all four fingers, or maybe just one of them, and it says like you. I think I'm mixing up memes, but there's basically, it's all us. It's all us. And so when we have trauma in the body, the process that I think is vital is getting ourself back into alignment. And so that trauma may have impacted you physically. You may have injuries, you may not be able to do things, and maneuvering your way out of that and opening up as much as you can around it so that you're a full expression of self, and then going into the mind and reworking the story about what happened. It doesn't mean we're discounting or giving or saying that the person is correct or that we need to like them in this lifetime. We can hold all of that and we can put it into a box, right? The story that we've been holding our entire life, put it into our box and set it aside. And then open a new version of that. And when we open a new version of that, we can create how this event or this person I need to be careful here because there's a lot of people that absolutely think that what other people do is wrong and negative. And in one box, that's true. And I can see that. However, our ability to see multiple perspectives gets us closer to godliness, gets us closer to the source, gets us closer to universal wisdom. Because from the perspective of the rabbit, the fox that's hunting it is wrong. From the perspective of the fox, the rabbit is lunch. From the perspective of the forest, the quarrels between the foxes and the rabbits are necessary for the evolution of so much else of the forest that they're not even aware of. As they're running through, they're taking nutrients from one part to the other. They're carrying seeds. They're doing a lot that they're not even aware of. There's other things witnessing, and they're creating whole other universes within the spectrum of the ecosystem. And so, because you went through an event, it may have contributed to the whole of the forest of this reality. This is an example of how we can create a positive spin to a very negative traumatic event. Is there anything that this negative traumatic event has stimulated you to be or to create or to be interested in that wouldn't have happened unless you went through this? Almost every solution that's ever been created started with a problem. So really that word problem needs to be reworked in our psyche. A problem doesn't need to not exist. A problem is an opportunity. It's the doorway for the revelation of the solution. And if we continue to hold on to the idea that our traumatic experiences are problems that needed to never, ever happen, well, then the possibility that that dark place in our history to open up a whole world of possibility because of your unique understanding of it and what you could create because of that, that's closed off. And that expression from that trauma doesn't ever materialize. It doesn't ever manifest. It doesn't ever express. Which means what? It gets depressed and packed into us. And it weighs us down. And we carry it. And the more that we're carrying, the harder it is to be present. And the less we're present, the less aligned we are with now, and the less power we have, and the more likely you're going to create exactly from holding on to this box, because this is the lens that you're seeing life through. And it might not happen. We're trained to learn something this week, take a test next week, take a test next week, do something this week, get a paycheck next week. It doesn't necessarily happen like that. The wisdom could literally materialize and manifest 40 years later in a conversation with a grandchild. And so a good question to ask yourself when you're in a hard space in life is really reflect on yourself and ask, what would the 80-year-old version of myself think of this? What would the 80-year-old version of myself think of it? And that's still like staying within the boundaries of our self, right? We're just going forward in time. We're not zooming out to the level of the forest and asking a question, what would the forest think about us as the rabbit? What would the forest think about the fox? We're not doing that. We're just thinking, what would the more wiser version of us think about this? Would they be stirred up as much? Because we all right now can think about how we were when we were 14 years old and what we cared about with absolute importance and energy. And so in every moment, the invited way of being, I almost said goal, but goal essentially means that does target work better? No, it's just an invitation. Everyone's perfect as they are. The invitation is in every moment. In every moment, there's choices. And the choice is to be the greatest version of yourself that you know how to be. So I walked out of my house this morning and I saw on our driveway, and I had my hands completely full. This is a very silly example. I saw on my driveway a fork that had been crushed from probably one of our cars running over it. I don't know where the fork came from. And there's a moment. Do I pick up this plastic mess or do I just leave it there? My hands, then I go like, well, my hands are full. So it's, I'll do it next time I see it. And then there's this jostling of which direction do you go? Do you pick up the garbage, even if you didn't make it? Or like, even if it's going to interrupt your day? Again, very simple, even stupid example, but we're dealing with this on a moment to moment basis. That person said something, and I think that he was saying it in a derogatory way towards me. Do I react? Do I say something negative and derogatory back to him to attack his character, to devalue what they said to me? Do I continue smiling? Do I take this as feedback? Do I see myself in that other person and happy for their existence and their progression and their vision? Thank you for sharing your perspective. There's all of these different choices that we're making. And back to the vision board, back to your intentions. What is the person that is going to be creating your realities? How are they looking at life? It's not as simple as cutting out pictures from a magazine. You do that just to go through a dry run. That's like training wheels. So when you see the picture of that house, you get the feeling because you're looking at it. That's one part of the equation. It's also the mindset. That's a lot of responsibility. Are you worried about the person that cut you off in traffic still? Because owning that thing is a lot of responsibility. You might not have the bandwidth to also do these other things that we're attached to now. When we create an intention for reality, you absolutely are going to give up the reality that we're in right now. Absolutely. There's no way around that. We're holding on to our current reality, all of us. Every single one of us, whatever is existing in your reality, you are holding on to. You're holding on to stories, you're holding on to thought patterns, you're holding on to actions. That's allowing the reality to exist. If there's another reality you would like to jump through to, it's going to require you to let go of this reality. And there's going to be a moment where you haven't grabbed onto the new reality and you have to let go to this one, because you can't have both filling in the same space in the same time. One reality per moment is the max. And so detaching our addictions in this reality is going to allow the space for another reality to come in. This is the more important thing. The more important thing is letting go of what's like cords attaching us, like Spider-Man cords attaching us to every aspect of this reality. So if you're currently going through a traumatic experience and you desire something else, what are you holding on to keep you there? So let's go with trauma again. If you're in an existence right now where there's a trauma that's impacting your life, and you would like a reality where that trauma doesn't bother you anymore, or where that trauma is replaced with love and joy and happiness and kinship and harmony with what you see with your eyes, hear with your ears, feel with your heart, as opposed to protection, feelings of fear, anxiety, frustration. If you're looking to replace realities, what are you holding on to? What are you addicted to in this story where you feel as a victim? There's a lot of emotions that happen with fear, anxiety. Those are some of the most powerful emotions that we have. When you look into the human experience, you realize that the human being is made to express, but the body, this physical body, is very attached to surviving. So much so that it's going to prioritize keeping us safe over happiness. It's going to stop us from crossing the road because it doesn't want to get run over. And that part of us is so much more powerful than the part of us that would like us to cross the road to get to the other side. That part of us isn't concerned with getting run over. So there's part of us that's saying, no, don't cross the road. You're going to get hit by a car. There's part of us saying, I would like to go to the other side to see what's over there. And then there's, if you have a relationship with those two parts of us, you get a grander perspective of both of those. And you can be in the experience of it all. And if you're in the darkness right now, it's really difficult to just forget about it. Okay, you're saying detach, so I'm just going to detach. Oh, but it's still there. Yes, it's, again, a dynamic process. I personally like to take people through drills and exercises where we override the experience, because just emptying, just detaching, just telling ourselves, don't think about that, that basically makes us think about it. And so an example of that is what I did earlier. And what I did earlier was say, put your current scenario in a box, and are you able to look at it from another perspective? And if you're focusing on that other perspective of how is this good for me? How is this good for society? How does this contribute to the whole of existence? And you're focusing on that, now you're attaching to this story. There's going to be less of you that can attach to the other story. So that's why I said, put it in a box, put it aside. You don't need it now. Are you able to rewrite a different story? And you literally can rewrite it. You can journal out your experience as it happened, how it impacted you. I'm sure that's very easy to do because we've been rerunning it our entire life. And then another sheet of paper, we flip that sheet of paper over, or that book over, whatever it is. And now we write down how this has benefited us, how this is going to benefit reality, how this is going to benefit society. That's one way. Another way, flip the page over and rewrite the whole entire scenario. How would it have needed to be in order for you to be joyous, harmonious, happy, loving to this individual? What differences would need to have happened? A lot of people don't think to do that because we're not wired to rewrite our past, because we're taught that the past has happened and there's no way of changing it. Back to electricity and the science of the body, and we don't really understand how this reality works currently. Currently, we're at a stage, just like when we didn't know that electricity went through the body, we're still at another stage where we think that past happened, present is happening now, and the future is yet to happen. That's mainstream science. That's why we do experiments where we're measuring cause and effect. That's essentially almost every single scientific experiment that has ever been done is measuring cause and effect, because we're under the foundational understanding that in this physical reality, a stimulation of a cause is originating here and it's affecting reality in the future. And we don't grant ourselves the flexibility to allow time to exist in a universal way, meaning that the past, present, and future is existing now. And reality, we also don't grant ourselves the ability to feel into a fluid reality that is capable of changing, not based on other physical traits within the reality, but based on something that is ascended, transcended above this, greater than, not just above, but greater than this physical reality. So when we journal about the past experience, the traumatic experience, are we able to create a different past? Are we able to, just like we create a vision board and we get the training wheels of feeling into that, are we able to create a different past to train us, like training wheels, how to feel harmonious with where we came from? You see, because we think about the past is not happening anymore, but it is happening if we're holding on to it. If we're holding on to the trauma, it's absolutely happening now. You're connected to that reality. It's happening. You're holding on to it. You're dragging it with you. So what do we do about that? What's the alternative reality? Do you know what that is? Write it down. Think about it. Contemplate on it. Now you have an alternative perspective of being. And if you practice this, it may not work the way that you were hoping for the first time, because you have no concept of what it's supposed to do. But as you practice it again, and you practice it again, and you practice it again, you'll start to feel like, oh, maybe like it's a new sensation. And you get better and better and better at it through repetition. And when we learn to rewrite our past and how we feel about it and how we relate with it, we can absolutely rewrite our current present moment. And then we can rewrite our future. We can rewrite our relationships. And this is how we create a harmonious reality. This is how we embody creatorship. All right, everybody. I had an amazing time. I'm going to end there. I'll be in Prague next Saturday doing an event. If you guys are around Prague, And I will then be in Ireland the Saturday after that. So it's the 15th and the 22nd of June. I will be with the Human Garage crew, and we're doing events there. And I've been opening. Again, I'm not attached to that, so I'm just like seeing if I'm one of the opening acts, and I'm happy to do that. So if you guys are in Europe, we're going through Europe for a few more weeks, and then we're coming back to the West Coast of the USA. We were just in New York a few days ago.